Hi friends, Evolving Guys here. Thanks for following along with our collection journey in hopes that it inspires yours. So today's video is in some ways similar and in some ways different from previous videos. So I'm going to talk about some cards that I'm adding to my collection. So that's the part that's similar to what I've done in the past. But today's a little different because I'm going to talk about a couple card shops that I visited. And in this case, my family and I went on family vacation recently. And so these are card shops that are not my local card shops. These are card shops that I never visited before. And I don't know about you, but when I'm in a new place, one of the first things I do is I check and see what card shops are nearby. And hopefully I have a chance to stop in and check them out. So I'm going to talk about 3 card shops that I visited on my recent family vacation, give them a shout out and just about the good work that they're doing, and just thank them for being a Pokemon presence in their respective communities. So my family and I went to the Olympic National Park, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, which is west of Seattle up in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. So I know if you're not familiar with the Pacific Northwest, you might not know a lot about the geography of that area, but Olympic National Park, Seattle's actually not on the coast, not on the ocean coast, but it's on the Puget Sound, which is a body of water kind of inland from, and what separates kind of Seattle from the ocean is this humongous landmass called the Olympic Peninsula. And it's a really cool national park, and my son is in 4th grade, and so 4th graders, actually, word to the wise, through the National Park Service, 4th graders get free admission to all national parks. You can apply online. It's just a super simple application, and then you print out this form. And then if you take it to any national park, they'll give you an actual pass, and that pass is good for free admission to national parks for that school year. So it starts when they start 4th grade, all through their 4th grade year in the summer following 4th grade. And so it's a cool thing to do if you're interested in national parks. It gives you a little bit of chance to see the country, a chance to save a little money. And so Olympic National Park is a really interesting park. This isn't a national parks podcast, but just to say it's a cool place. It's got temperate rainforest, it has mountains, it has ocean. It kind of has a lot of different ecosystems within the park. And it's a pretty big park that doesn't have a lot of roads in it, and it really has one highway that kind of runs around the outside of the national park, kind of that circumnavigates the park. And so we got to visit several small towns that are in that area, and the first 2 of these places I'm going to talk about are in these kind of relatively small towns that are near or they're bordering on Olympic National Park. So I understand that maybe many of you won't visit these card shops in person, although if you are up in that area, I encourage you to do that, but they have online presences too. So the first place I went is called Dragon's Pride, and it's in Aberdeen, Washington. So this is their card buy-sell trade. They do have a TCG Player website, so I haven't looked at it myself. But this is a relatively new card shop. I think he said they've been open maybe a year or maybe even less than a year. And, I went in. It sounds like Pokemon is not as big in Aberdeen, that they do a lot of Magic and some other games. I'm kind of forgetting now if it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Or if it's something else, Lorcana. But it's a really nice space, and he had quite a lot of Pokemon singles, which was cool for me. As you know, visiting card shops can always be a mixed bag. They're always good experiences, I think, but some shops have a lot of Pokemon, some shops don't have much, some shops have a lot of singles, some don't have many singles, some have a lot of modern sealed products, some even have some vintage product, although I think that's, in my experience, it's pretty rare to find a card shop that just on the shelves has a lot of vintage sealed stuff. Sometimes you'll get some sealed singles. But anyway, I stopped in there. I was actually the only customer. I think it's a family business. His whole family, the guy who runs it, he and his wife and kids were there kind of all hanging out. I can see it's maybe a labor of love and trying to get this thing off the ground. So anyway, I looked through the singles, and I'll show you what I picked up. So Dragon's Pride, there you go. And Aberdeen, I didn't know a lot about Aberdeen before visiting. I don't think I had ever been. I think maybe I had driven through once or twice in the past, but never visited. Aberdeen, I sort of learned when I was there. It has a lot, it's interesting. It's kind of on the water and has kind of this interesting seafaring history, but it's the boyhood home of Kurt Cobain, who obviously later migrated up to Seattle, famous frontman of Nirvana. So Aberdeen, it was kind of fun just to think about a young Kurt Cobain kind of kicking around the streets of Aberdeen. And there are some references in his songs to some of the places in Aberdeen, including there's a small kind of memorial park for Kurt Cobain there, which we visited. So anyway, that is the place. The things I picked up, so a couple of things. I don't really collect vintage cards, but the one vintage thing, if is vintage available, the thing I will look for is any artwork by Tamakazu Kamiya. he is, I mean, I think thanks to Real Breaking Nate's influence, he's really, someone whose art I also kind of noticed over time. And Nate, I think, was maybe the first one to point out Tomokazu Kamiya's art. And yeah, I just love his stuff. And so if I ever, it's fun to look through. We kind of often say in the hobby, you can't collect everything, right? So to have that thing that you're looking for to help guide when you're looking through cards. And so for me, anything vintage, really anything before like Sword and Shield, I'm not really collecting per se, but if there's a Tomokazu card that I don't have, I mean, someday maybe I'll get my act a little bit more organized and try to do a master set of his cards. But anyway, so I grabbed this, you can see not very expensive, but you can see here, Snubble. And sometimes I'll get home and realize I have a copy of this already, but for $1, I mean, I couldn't remember off the top of my head if I had these cards or not. I didn't have my card list with me, actually. So so I got a couple. And then the Jinx, I'm pretty sure I don't have this card of Tomokazu Kamiya. So, and you can see if you're unfamiliar, the illustrator is usually, it's written on the card somewhere. It's going to be different locations depending on the series of the card. But you can see here, it's kind of hard to get in focus. So anyway, this is the first edition. I didn't even notice that until now, actually, but that's kind of cool. So anyway, I grabbed a handful of these 3 Tomokazu cards. I'll double check my binder. I have a binder of his cards, and I'll see if I have these 3. I'm pretty sure I don't have this one. I might have these other 2, but that's no problem for $1. It's worth taking the chance since I didn't have my list with me. And then the 2 modern cards I got for my collection are both from 151. So the Ninetales, again, I didn't have my list with me, and I was trying to rack my brain if I had this card, and I didn't think I did, and so I figured even if I did have it, I could just resell, or I could resell this one, but it turns out I actually didn't have it, so that's great. So I got the Ninetales EX. It's from Scarlet and Violet 151, and I also got the Altaria alt art, or I guess it's called it's the special illustration, or is this special illustration rare? I think it is. But anyway, I didn't have these 2 cards for my collection. I've been getting better. 151 has not been a big focus of mine as far as collecting goes. We have some to open, actually. I've been stockpiling some 151 over here that I'm going to open on the channel at some point. So I look forward to kind of breaking into that stuff. But anyway, I didn't have these cards, and so that's all stuff I picked up. He had a really nice display case. It was really well organized, and he had the vintage stuff in a binder because he's actually getting ready to go to a card show, and so I kind of got first crack at the binder, which was very cool. But he was very nice. I forget his name, but I encourage you to check out, again, if you're ever in Aberdeen, of course, Dragon's Pride, you can check out their website, and again, they do have a TCG Player Pro account if you want to shop their stuff. Then the second place we went is, I thought, a creative name, right? And I think pretty cool because you can tell from the name that they really are Pokemon specific. Now, when I went into the store, they do other things. I think it's probably hard to make a go of it as just Pokemon, but you can see from the name that they really are trying to lean into Pokemon. So you can see the one-stop shop for all your Pokemon needs. Now, this place is in Port Angeles. Oh, it doesn't actually list it here. Port Angeles, Washington is a town on the northern coast of the Olympic Peninsula. It borders the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So it's still a few hours from Seattle because the driving, you have to go kind of around the sound to get there unless you take a ferry. But anyway, I stopped in here. Also a card shop that's relatively new. Again, I feel like around a year or maybe less than a year, they're still just trying to make a good go of it. His hours are only in the evenings, which I didn't actually ask him this explicitly, but kind of indicates to me that he has a regular day job and that he's doing this as a love, passion project in the evenings. And so that's really cool that he is, cares enough about being a Pokemon presence in his community that at least for now, he's doing it outside of his normal business hours, and they open, I think, at 4:30 and are open later. So anyway, also a cool store. He did have some vintage sealed, which I don't see very often. Not like super, super old, but some early Sword and Shield stuff. He had some Champions Path sealed boxes that I've never opened a pack of Champions Path. I was really tempted to buy one of those boxes, and the price seemed pretty good to me, but I decided just to go with singles. Again, he had not as many singles as the other store, which is fine. And I always, again, look through. I have my list. I did happen to have my list this time, so I could look through and see if he had anything that I needed. So I haven't looked at the website yet, so I don't know what's all on there or what they're selling. But again, just happy to kind of promote them. I know he did mention, and this is maybe a word to the wise for some of you if you're thinking about opening a card shop, he did reach out to Pokemon Company International to host the TCG tournaments and they actually turned him down because his logo is a little too close to their intellectual property, and he doesn't want to rebrand and go to all the trouble of like changing the name after doing all that he's done as far as branding and advertising and stuff. And so he's I don't know if Pokemon will reconsider that, but that is something to keep in mind for those of you who are thinking about Pokemon stuff. So anyway, I only got 2 cards there. He only had 2 cards that I needed. One is Luxio. Again, just trying to check off. We're doing pretty well on Paldean Fates. I've been really working hard on that set in the last month or so. So we've crossed off most of the cards now, except for kind of the heavy hitters in that set, most of the lower value stuff. But I did need the Luxio, so I grabbed that. And then one of the kind of a little bit heavy hitter in Twilight Masquerade. I mean, these 2 cards together, I think were around $45, with this being just like $3, and this one being like $40. But the Teal Mask Ogre Pawnee X, again, we did the Twilight Masquerade challenge on the site or on the channel, excuse me, and did a good job, but still are definitely missing a handful of cards. I think this is the most valuable card that we're missing besides the top 3 cards, which are kind of the real heavy hitter cards. So anyway, it's nice to kind of check these off. At this point, I'm just trying to get all the cards but those top 3, and then my hope is to continue to open Twilight Masquerade because it should be readily available for quite a while now, or quite a while yet. And so the hope is that we'll be able to pull at least a few of those cards before we have to break down and buy, and prices seem to have stabilized. So anyway, so those are the cards I picked up from Good Evening, creative and cute name. And then the last place, I didn't get a card, but in Seattle, there's a place called Tabletop Village. You may have heard of it. I think, again, it's a pandemic era shop. I think they opened just during the pandemic. I actually first found them in the winter. I was in Seattle for a different reason and just stopped in. I was staying close to where they were located, and so I just looked them up, and I didn't know anything about them. And it was really cool because I stepped in. This is like the beauty of the Pokemon community, right? Is I stepped in the front door in January earlier this year, and they were doing, actually, they had free food. They said, oh, come on, get some food. They were doing kind of a send-off because they have quite a few competitive Pokemon TCG players who play at the highest levels. They have some internationally ranked youth players, and they really are, and they are really Pokemon. I mean, I think they do some of the other stuff too, but they are like 90% Pokemon. And they really have, I think, thrown themselves especially into the TCG, and they're kind of known, even being around just a short time. I think they're pretty well known. Like the Card Party event, if you've been to Card Party, I went the first year. I didn't go this past year, but I think they sponsored the TCG or ran the TCG tournament in Card Party Part 2. So I think they're, again, for not being around all that long, I think they're really establishing a strong reputation around the TCG. It's a very fun place. It's a former jiu-jitsu gym, if I recall correctly. I talked to the owner back in January, and everything closed during COVID. He couldn't do the jiu-jitsu stuff, or maybe it's taekwondo or whatever the martial art was they were doing. They couldn't do it, and so that was a time where he kind of rethought and retooled, and it reopened as a Pokemon card store. So anyway, they have a ton of singles. They have almost any, it's kind of overwhelming. I think almost any card you would ever want, they probably have somewhere. So in that case, it's not so much. Some of these smaller shops, like I just really will look through everything that they have, and there's probably just a handful of cards that I'm seeking that they might have. This is the opposite. They probably have anything I could possibly want. Anything on my list, they probably have somewhere. And so then it just becomes a matter of like, what 2 or 3 cards, do I want to nab at this particular location? And so I think I have this right, that I got these 3 cards there. I'm not actually 100%. I had all these cards in one location. I was trying to remember back if these are the 3 I actually got at Tabletop Village. But in any case, Tabletop Village in the Chinatown area. I think it's in the I don't know the neighborhoods in Seattle very well, but it's near the Chinatown area of Seattle. But I just decided to go in on Twilight Masquerade. I'm trying to really get down to just having those 3 big heavy hitters left. So I grabbed, these 2, not very expensive. And then the most valuable card I nabbed there was, I guess, how do you say it? Sinestia EX. And so anyway, these are my pickups from Tabletop Village. Shout out to Tabletop Village. I'm sure you can find them online there. Again, I think you're doing really well and have a great reputation already for being a relatively new shop. And this is also best wishes to all those small card shops that are starting. I know a lot of shops closed during the pandemic. I know some had been open for a long time before and closed during the pandemic. I know some, during the heart of like Pokemon mania in the early pandemic times, I know some opened and have since closed because they realized that, when the prices came down on a lot of Pokemon sealed stuff, especially modern sealed, the margins are really thin and it's kind of tough to make a living doing that. So I applaud these other 2 stores that are making a go of it, that have opened relatively recently. and tabletop too. So anyway, this is what I like to do when I go visit a new place, is to check out the local card store scene. And so I shout out these guys, and yeah, I'll be doing some more traveling, so maybe I'll do more videos like this where I just like stop into local card shops. I'm not like so bold to just like film while I'm in the card shop. Maybe they would like that and see it as like free publicity. I'm a little bit more private, actually, even though I have a YouTube channel. It's just a little awkward to like run in there with my camera and film. So I do this kind of after the fact to show you their cards, to show you what I picked up there, and to give them a shout. So anyway, that's what I have for now. And thank you guys for watching this a little bit different video. And please leave a like, please subscribe, and we'll talk to you all soon.